Deep down, each of us holds on to moments that, it would seem, should remain in the past, yet continue to haunt us in the present. Why, despite all rational arguments and the desire to move forward, do thoughts of someone never leave us, not even for a day? Why does our heart skip a beat with every notification, hoping to see a familiar name, even after enduring pain? The truth is, this longing isn't for the person themselves, but for the image we created, the illusion we projected onto them. It's a longing for the love we wanted it to be, not for what it actually was. Carl Jung once said, "What we do not face in ourselves, we find as fate." Perhaps this is precisely what is happening now. This isn't merely a breakup. It's an encounter with our own reflection, showing us what we've never dared to confront. This won't be an easy journey, full of cliché advice on how to move on by pretending nothing happened. The truth can be painful, it will touch hidden wounds, but it is precisely this truth that will bring liberation. The reality is harsh. Often, what we call love is merely our shadow seeking solace in someone who feeds our unhealed wounds. It's a subconscious craving for validation, even if it means remaining tethered to someone who destroys us. But this isn't love, it's imprisonment. Imagine, the very attachment, the soul-wrenching pain, and the endless anxiety that arise whenever you face neglect or rejection are not actually about the specific person, but are rooted in the depths of your own self, which is yet to be discovered. In this article, we will embark on a captivating journey of revelation to explore the hidden corners of your mind, understand why you cling to those who cause you suffering, and most importantly, find a path to liberation. Prepare yourself, for what you are about to hear may not be easy, as truth, as we know, can be painful. However, confronting this truth will allow you to stop begging for love and begin the search for yourself. So, if you are ready to face the truth, let's continue. Have you ever wondered why you feel such a strong connection to someone who, seemingly, brings you nothing good? Why, even when realizing the abuse, manipulation, and pain, does something within you crave more? The answer lies not in the other person, but within yourself, in the depths of your subconscious. The renowned Swiss psychiatrist and founder of analytical psychology, Carl Jung, viewed relationships not merely as social interactions. In his view, every emotional bond is a mirror of our unconscious. When we fall in love, we don't see the person as they truly are. Instead, we project onto them those parts of ourselves that are unfamiliar to us or that we have been forced to suppress throughout our lives. Jung called this phenomenon psychic projection. Attachment to a specific person is often driven not by their actual qualities, but by what they embody in the depths of one's inner world. Subconsciously, this person might embody the archetypes of the anima or animus, primary images of the feminine and masculine principles rooted in the collective unconscious. These symbolic figures reflect missing qualities, a yearning for wholeness and harmony. However, when these images are projected onto another person, a powerful illusion arises, blurring the line between self-sufficiency and dependence, replacing true love with blind submission. Initial admiration and passion transform into a painful obsession when the real person doesn't align with the idealized image created by the projection. One loses connection with their own identity, settling for less, finding excuses even for cruel treatment, consciously sabotaging their own interests, all in the name of love, which is in reality just an illusion born of emotional need, disguised as an unconscious fantasy. As long as an individual seeks externally what is missing internally, they remain captive to others' perceptions, held hostage by unreturned messages, inconsistent attention, and futile quest for validation. The subconscious believes that self-realization is only possible through another person. However, as Carl Jung warned, until these hidden aspects of the personality are integrated, one will be doomed to repeat the same scenarios, choosing the same types of people, just in different guises. And this is not simply bad luck, but a subconsciously predetermined fate. How then can one break the chains of this dependence? How can one free oneself from a life dictated by others' emotional needs and return to the authentic self? This very question will be the subject of further exploration. We will delve into the unconscious craving for approval and the high price one pays for betraying their own essence. From a young age, individuals learn that to win love, they must meet expectations, be pleasing, useful, and desirable to earn the attention of others. Thus, a carefully constructed persona, a mask designed to satisfy others' desires, is formed. However, each time one adjusts to someone else's expectations, they move further away from their true nature. Carl Jung called this phenomenon the persona, a character created for social adaptation. It is a necessary tool, but when one begins to identify exclusively with this mask, the authentic self is suppressed. This is precisely what happens in relationships shadowed by emotional dependency. The individual dims their inner light to keep another person close, suppressing their desires, their suffering, their essence, just to avoid rejection. The problem is that the validation so desperately sought in the external world, in glances, touches, others' approval, never brings complete satisfaction. No matter how much another person praises them, if deep down the individual feels they are living a lie, a sense of emptiness will haunt them. It's like trying to satisfy hunger with a breath of wind. The inner emptiness gnawing at a person from within is not merely a longing for a specific individual. It is a longing for a lost self, for those aspects of one's essence that had to be abandoned for the approval of others, for a free life without the fear of rejection. As long as an individual continues to seek validation of their identity in another person, every breakup will feel like a crushing defeat. Any silence will be perceived as a sign of rejection, and every critical remark as a deep emotional wound. It is in this vulnerability that anxiety arises, manifesting as chest tightness, insomnia, obsessive thoughts about messages, and constant emotional vigilance. Deep down, one fears not so much losing the other, but facing the necessity of looking into the mirror of their own soul and realizing they no longer know who they are without these relationships. However, this anxiety is not an enemy, but rather a signal, a symptom of an internal conflict tearing the psyche apart. Different parts of the personality strive to emerge, but the individual persistently suppresses them, pushing them into the subconscious. And the more one tries to ignore these inner voices, the louder they scream. It is at this moment that the true role of anxiety in destructive relationships becomes clear. It is not just a side effect, but an alarm bell signaling mental distress. To cope with this state, it is necessary to go beyond symptomatic treatment and address the root causes. Further on, we will examine in more detail how anxiety arises from internal fragmentation and what it attempts to communicate about itself. What is commonly referred to as anxiety is, in reality, a muffled cry from those aspects of the personality that have been forgotten, rejected, or even amputated in the name of ephemeral love. It is nothing less than the soul's desperate attempt to warn a person of impending danger, to indicate that they are mired in emotional falsehoods. The price one is forced to pay for maintaining illusory relationships is exorbitantly high, and their authentic self pays for it. As Carl Jung astutely noted, the human psyche is a complex, multi-layered structure composed of conscious and unconscious elements that must remain in harmony. When one suppresses their true essence to preserve a fragile balance in relationships, this harmony is irrevocably broken. The result is a cruel internal division, which manifests as exhausting anxiety. This is not merely an unreasoning fear of rejection. It's a quiet but fierce battle between what one truly feels and what they allow themselves to feel. Each time they hold back tears to avoid disturbing others, each time they utter a false, "I'm okay," while their inner world is tearing apart, they only deepen this agonizing rift. And anxiety arises as a defense mechanism, designed to protect the psyche from further destruction. It's the subconscious's desperate attempt to restore lost balance. Within a person, a real battle unfolds. On one side, the false self begs for external validation and approval. On the other side, the true self suffocates in the grip of lies and pretense, crying out for authenticity and self-expression. An inner yearning grips a person like a vice when they try to fit into frameworks that are inherently alien to them. The heart pounds wildly, as if striving to break free from the captivity of an existence that does not align with its true nature. An enduring fear of loss haunts them, for deep down, they have already lost themselves. And no external factors, be it a long-awaited message, a reunion with loved ones, or new promises, can quell this longing. For the root of the problem lies not in the external world, but in the loss of connection with one's own essence. As long as one seeks externally what can only be found within, anxiety will be their constant companion. However, Carl Jung teaches that this internal fragmentation is not a condemnation, but rather a call for reunification, for delving deep within oneself, for attentively listening to the longing that seeks to reclaim lost parts of the personality. It is here that one of the most powerful and dangerous forces of the unconscious emerges, the shadow. Further in this narrative, we will explore how the psychological shadow fuels the repetition of destructive behavioral patterns and why one repeatedly chooses what destroys them. True freedom requires a willingness to face what has been carefully hidden from oneself. Many believe they consciously choose their social circle. However, as experts in psychology assert, the choice of a partner for interaction is often determined by deep, hidden processes occurring within the human mind. This refers to the so-called shadow that hidden, rejected, and suppressed part of the personality which, nonetheless, exerts an enormous influence on an individual's life path. The eminent Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung defined the shadow as the sum of those qualities and traits that a person does not accept in themselves, but which are nonetheless inherent to them. It is everything that society, parents, or cultural norms have labeled as wrong, ugly, or shameful, in which the individual, seeking acceptance and approval, was forced to hide deep within their soul. However, as Jung emphasized, to bury does not mean to eliminate. Suppressed emotions and desires do not vanish without a trace. Instead, they transform into powerful psychic energy, merely waiting for their moment to erupt. And, paradoxically, interpersonal relationships become the most fertile ground for the shadow's manifestation. It is the shadow, acting unconsciously, that attracts people into one's life who serve as its reflection. For this reason, many people, without realizing it, repeatedly play out the same destructive relationship pattern, changing partners but not the core problem. The pattern remains consistent. One dissolves into another, causes pain, then self-flagellation follows, and finally, settling for less, which is mistakenly taken for love. This is not coincidence or ill fate, but a logical consequence of the influence of one's own inner darkness shaping destiny. If emotionally unavailable partners, narcissists, or manipulators consistently appear in one's life, it's worth asking, what do these relationships reveal about the aspects of personality that are carefully hidden from oneself? Perhaps it speaks to suppressed anger, a craving for validation, or a desire for control. This is why one subconsciously submits to someone who embodies traits they dare not express themselves. Shadow aspects of the personality find expression and projection onto others. Dislike of certain traits in others is often a reflection of one's own unaccepted qualities. Conversely, admiration for someone can be linked to suppressed or rejected aspects of one's own personality. This complex interplay of projections is a crucial stage of self-discovery until one recognizes the hidden sides of their self. As long as the shadow remains unacknowledged, it will attract situations and people that reflect it, creating opportunities for awareness. As Carl Jung asserted, resistance to undesirable aspects only strengthens them, while acceptance leads to transformation. It's not enough to simply avoid destructive relationships, it's necessary to understand why they arise in one's life. This requires courage, the courage to look within and acknowledge that part of the chaos in life comes from within. Old wounds, unresolved traumas, and suppressed desires all require integration, not denial. But how can one transform the shadow into a source of strength? How can one break the vicious cycle of emotional self-sabotage and restore harmony in the relationship with oneself? Jung called this process individuation, the path of returning to the center of one's personality. Individuation can become the starting point for emotional liberation. Now that the shadow has been discovered, the question arises, are you ready to embark on the path of healing? There comes a turning point in everyone's life when the realization that further existence in a state of fragmentation becomes unbearable. One can no longer tolerate the chasm between the image presented to others and an inner world full of contradictions and unexpressed emotions. It is at this critical moment, when the burden of emotional pain reaches its peak, that the true process of healing and self-discovery begins. Carl Jung called this the beginning of individuation, a complex and profound psychological process in which one frees oneself from the shackles of social masks and unconscious traumas to discover their true essence. However, one should not harbor illusions, envisioning individuation as an easy and pleasant stroll. It is, first and foremost, a painful confrontation with oneself, requiring courage and honesty. The individual must come face to face with everything they have diligently avoided for many years, their own complexes, emotional wounds, and destructive behavioral patterns. It is necessary to open one's eyes to the games they themselves created and acknowledge their role in the pain they inflicted upon themselves. Not because they consciously sought suffering, but because they simply knew no other way of existing. Their identity was distorted by a deficit of love and attention, a desperate need for approval, and a paralyzing fear of rejection. The process of individuation begins at that fateful moment when one ceases futile attempts to gain attention from those who persistently ignore them and turns their gaze inward, armed with ruthless honesty. During this period of self-analysis, sharp questions arise. Why do I so desperately sacrifice my interests just to keep another person close? What inner voids am I trying to fill? What part of my essence do I give away each time I humbly beg for love? These soul-piercing questions possess a healing power capable of shattering the veil of illusions that hides the truth. In the course of this deep self-discovery, the difficult but necessary process of reclaiming lost fragments of the soul begins. Every boundary set, every instance of silence instead of humiliating pleas, every firm no, uttered instead of habitual submission, becomes a powerful affirmation of one's own deep self. One gradually frees themselves from the imposed false image, created merely to please others, and begins to build a new self, more complete, fulfilled, and free. And now comes the culminating moment of transformation. When one reunites with their inner core, the need for another as a savior disappears. There is no longer a need for external approval to feel one's own worth. The need to beg for attention to feel complete falls away, as one returns to their own body, their personal space, their unwavering truth. As Jung astutely noted, individuation is the process of realizing one's true self, the core of the personality, liberated from societal masks and the tyranny of one's own shadow. It is at this moment that the realization comes: to feel complete in life, one no longer needs those who cause pain. One only needs to remember that pain is not a defining characteristic of one's identity, but merely one chapter in its multifaceted story. However, before concluding this exploration, a final, crucial step must be taken: to consider the practical application of the knowledge gained. It is important to understand how to integrate these principles into the fabric of daily life, how to decisively and irrevocably break the toxic bond with those who are a source of emotional pain. And, most importantly, how to transform this painful severance into an inexhaustible source of inner strength and resilience. Having reached such a significant point in self-discovery, one has undoubtedly already felt, deep within their being, the need for change. Perhaps the true nature of the pain remained unclear, veiled under the guise of weakness, an excessive need for approval, or a painful dependency. But now it becomes evident that it was nothing less than a desperate cry from the soul, a silent plea for help, testifying to immeasurable suffering and sacrifice. It was a sign that one had drifted so far from their true essence that they could barely recognize their own reflection. It's important to understand that letting go of the past doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It doesn't imply erasing memories or denying the pain experienced. Rather, it's a process of deep awareness, acceptance of what occurred, and finally, liberation from the burden of the past. It's the realization that the person who caused pain was only part of one chapter in life, but should not be present on its subsequent pages. Maintaining a connection with those who have a destructive impact is like trying to cross a vast ocean while dragging a heavy anchor. Inevitably, such a burden will lead to ruin, preventing one from reaching the desired shore. Do not succumb to illusions, for separation is always accompanied by emotional pain. Severing unseen ties requires considerable effort, as it's not merely about leaving a person. It's the burial of dreams, unfulfilled hopes, idealized images, and castles in the air that were never destined to materialize. However, this grief is sacred, serving as a precursor to spiritual rebirth. It's a necessary homage to mourning, allowing one to return to their authentic self, to occupy the life space that was previously filled by the absence of another. There is no longer a need to diminish one's self-worth by trying to fit into the confines of restrictive relationships. There's no need to meet the expectations of those who cannot see one's true essence. The time has come to choose oneself, to prioritize one's own interests, guided not by selfish motives but by the pursuit of wholeness. For as long as one clings to bonds that have long been broken, they only distance themselves from their own salvation. As Carl Jung wisely noted, the greatest privilege life offers us is to become who we truly are. And perhaps this choice is the bravest and most decisive one you can make right now. To give up trying to change another, not to try to fix past mistakes, but with unwavering confidence in your soul, to decide to live in accordance with your truth, without masks, without shackles, without repeating painful scenarios. So, it's worth considering. What do you need to free yourself from to finally feel liberation? And may everyone share their thoughts, using this space as a symbolic ritual of severance, an act of liberation from everything that weighs down and binds. You should write as if you are speaking to yourself, for that is indeed